Hello and welcome to the Situation Report today. Very glad to have you joining me. This is the show where we give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. My name is Jeremy Stalnecker. I am your host. And today we have a great guest on. We always have great guests on. But I am very thankful for this interview with Dr. George Grant. We look at the culture that is changing around us. We talk about this often on this show and trying to understand it, trying to navigate it, trying to figure out how we can move forward in spite of what a lot of people around us are doing. We've talked about that a lot, of course. But understanding culture is one thing. Knowing that culture is changing is something else. But then stepping back and asking the question, what's my job here? What should I be doing? Historically, we have a precedent, we have examples, we can gain some understanding. But really, particularly as people of faith, there is a very basic principle we need to get a hold of, a very basic principle that will guide us forward, and one that we talk about today in this interview. Dr. Grant is an incredible guest, such a clear thinker, an incredibly clear communicator, and I'm just very grateful to have been able to have this interview. Dr. Grant, for those of you that do not know him, is the pastor of Parish Presbyterian Church, the director of the Kings Meadows Study Center, founder of both the Franklin Classical School and Bannockburn College, and coordinator of the Chalmers Fund. He's an author of dozens of books that deal with issues of history, biography, politics, literature, social criticism. He's written hundreds of essays, articles, and columns. He is a regular contributor to World Radio and does so much work on behalf of the homeless for international relief in the area of sanctity of life. He has been on the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, Focus on the Family, 700 Club, Coral Ridge Hour, Point of View, Crossfire, World Magazine, Christianity Today. I mention all of that for one very simple reason. When we listen to this interview, you'll listen to this interview in just a second. We understand that this is a man who has done the work. He's been a church planter throughout his ministry. He's done the work of thinking on these issues, writing on these issues, communicating these issues, and is so helpful. I say this once in a while. I need to emphasize it more often. You need to find some voices, find some people that you can listen to regularly who speak clearly and understand the issues at play in the world around us and can help you navigate these. So much of what we naturally are drawn to, particularly if you're on social media and follow even conservative and Christian media, are really loud voices that may be technically right, but don't give you a lot to help guide your forward movement or guide you as you're raising your family and navigating the world around you. You need to find some clear, biblically sound, educated voices that can help you, and Dr. Grant is one of those people. Very grateful to bring this interview to you. Dr. Grant, thank you for joining me today. Really, really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. My joy to be with you.
We have a lot to talk about. There are some questions. Man, I'm excited to ask you and to get your perspective on from your experience and the opportunities you've had to write and talk and invest so much time in these. But before we get there, can we start with your story? This is always, I think, helpful as a listener to understand how you got to where you are. You have written many, many books. You give lectures. You pastored a church. You planted a church. You've been involved in this for a long time. But what did God bring you through to bring you to the place where you're doing what you're doing now?
I was raised in a nominally Christian home. My mother was a liberal Presbyterian. My father was a non-practicing Roman Catholic. And so I did not have a faith background, but the very first time I ever heard the gospel in high school, I knew that it was true. And so it never had this deep soul searching and wrestling. I immediately, after the next morning after my conversion experience at a stadium crusade, at my high school, I went to a little Christian bookstore and picked up some books, including Charles Haddon Spurgeon's The Soul Winner
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Richard Baxter's The Reformed Pastor, and I was off and going. I in college, I began to lead Bible studies in my dorm, and it's where I met my future wife. And we sort of looked forward to the possibility of doing some kind of ministry in the future, but I was fairly convinced that I was constitutionally incapable of being a pastor. And so, though I was interested in theological things, my thought was if I did go to seminary, it would be so that I could serve as some sort of aide or assistant to a congressman. I was very interested in politics and cultural issues. And so the focus for me was being prepared for cultural impact
right.
as a Christian. Um, Eventually, though, several of the Bible studies after we were married sort of kind of came together, and several of the men really pressed us to go ahead and plant a church. And so we began church planting
Yeah,
early in our ministry and have done church planting pretty much ever since.
yeah,
And my writing really grew out of those sort of varied interests and concerns, both pastoral and cultural. And I never really planned any of the trajectory of my career. God, in His good providence, just laid a lot of opportunities in our laps, and we tried to be as faithful as we could with all of the things along the way. We've been involved in classical Christian education for many decades and have been involved in the pro-life movement and in other cultural concerns and issues, lots of which I've written about in my books. So, it's been a really incredible journey of God's good providence to bring us to where we are.
Can I ask you, just personally hearing your story, I love your story because it is, I didn't plan this, God brought us to this, but God takes us through these steps, these phases or stages of life. And I think that a lot of people could look at someone like you and say, well, he planned this from the beginning. He's pointed his life toward this. Maybe it's been an uphill trajectory the entire time. And I try to communicate, particularly to young people, particularly young married couples, you don't know what God is going to do with you. You need to remain faithful and consistent. How do you counsel someone to kind of move through the various stages or phases of life so they can stay where God wants them and accomplish the things God wants them to accomplish?
Well, I think understanding that there are stages or seasons is
that's good.
Really, really important.
That's good.
We sometimes get so much in a hurry. We want to get past the steps that actually prepare us for what will come after. And so one of the things that I always try to emphasize when I give counsel to young people is be patient, seize every opportunity, but your responsibility is just to do the next right thing. It's not to do the 1,000 next right things. It's just the next right thing. Be faithful there, be faithful in the small things, and the Lord will broaden your horizons and widen your boundaries, and who knows where you'll go from there.
That's good. That wasn't part of what I had asked you to come talk about, but that leads me to another thing I didn't ask you to come talk about. In that is, as you're going through that journey, so I have 4 kids. My oldest 2 are 23 and 21, so I feel like I'm having these conversations a lot right now. And just hearing you talk, it just spurs so much in my mind. How do you then, on the do the next right thing right now, focus on what God has in front of you right now, how do you enjoy the journey is what people say. That's probably not the right question, but how do you enjoy those stages of life? And as you go through all these things, you've been involved in some really heavy stuff when you look at the pro-life movement, some of these other things. But how do you enjoy that with your family? How do you enjoy that through those various stages of life? How do you maintain the right perspective, I guess, is probably the better question.
Well, the joy of the Lord is our strength. First and foremost, contentment, satisfaction, and gladness and joy really don't come from our circumstances.
Yeah.
They come from recognizing the one who providentially arranges our circumstances. And to know that God's good purposes are best for us.
Yeah.
We can take gladness and joy wherever we are. You know, John Piper has this incredible phrase that became a title of one of his books. It's simply, don't waste your cancer. You know, you think, how do you find joy and gladness in cancer?
Yeah.
But if you approach even the most difficult adversities in your life with the certainty that God's provision for you is sufficient, and not just sufficient, but that it is excellent, then you can find joy and gladness there. And, you know, joy is not the same thing as happiness.
Sure.
Joy is that deeper resolve that comes when we trust God in all things at all times.
That's good.
And so what we have to do is we have to look for all of the places to express gratitude. One of the things that I often counsel people is when they're going through really difficult times is to keep a gratitude journal. Look for something every single day where you see God's hand of blessing. Reflect on it, give thanks for it, and that will change our hearts, our minds, our attitudes, and it will inevitably give us joy. Look for the beauty, look for the goodness and truth, and you'll find it.
That's great, man. That's fantastic. Just when you thought it couldn't get any better, Mike Lindell with MyPillow is launching the MyPillow 2.0. When Mike invented MyPillow, it had everything you could ever want in a pillow. Now, nearly 20 years later, he discovered a new technology that makes it even better. The MyPillow 2.0 has the patented adjustable fill of the original MyPillow, and now with a brand new fabric that is made with a temperature regulating thread. The MyPillow 2.0 is the softest, smoothest, and coolest pillow you'll ever own. For our exclusive listeners, the MyPillow 2.0 is buy one, get one free offer with promo code SITREP. MyPillow 2.0 temperature regulating technology is 100% made in the USA and comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Just go to MyPillow.com and click on the radio listener square to buy the one, get one free offer. Enter promo code SITREP or call 800-870-0283 to get your MyPillow 2.0 now. I'd like to camp there for a little while, but we'll move to the question at hand, and this is what we had started to talk about, and they are connected. We're going through this weird time in history, and you know, with a historical view, it may not be as unusual as we're treating it, but it's a different time for most of us. How do you view, just broadly, the moment that we're in right now from a biblical worldview perspective? How do you see things when you see the evil in our world seems to be speeding up? Certainly, it's more accessible through media, social media, and those kind of things. What we all kind of agreed on at one time was immoral or wrong is now being generally accepted, even in churches and among Christians. How do you view what we're going through right now?
Well, there's no question that we're going through a time of dramatic cultural change. But this is not unprecedented, as you mentioned. This is not the sort of cultural change that the world has never seen before.
Sure.
The truth is that people who think that our times are seeing unprecedented change don't know a whole lot about history.
Right.
They don't know a whole lot about the world of antiquity. They don't know a whole lot about the world of the 8th century or the 14th century. I mean, if we think we have it bad now, think about the 14th century with the Black Death, the Babylonian captivity of the church,
Right.
the Hundred Years' War, the Hanseatic League, the rise of scholasticism, the assaults of Tamerlane. I mean, this is nothing compared to that. The entire world was the Ukrainian-Russian line.
Yep.
The whole world
Yep.
was.
Yep.
So while we have to recognize that we're in the midst of dramatic cultural change, it's not unprecedented, and therefore we can go back and learn from those who have been through similar times to see what faithfulness looks like, to see how the world was in the end recovered from the madness. We can look at who were the people who stood, contra culturally during the time of the French Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution, and eventually saw a recall of some level of sanity. So that's the first thing. We need to think about this in historical terms, not in hysterical terms.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Then secondly, we have to realize that the problem that we face in our worlds today didn't begin with cultural change. It actually began when the church failed to do its job. Judgment begins at the house of God. Church doing its job or not doing its job. And so the second thing that we have to realize is that if we have not done our job, and as a result, we're now in the mess that we're in, the solution is for us to do our job.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. So, in times like this, the most important thing that we can do is go back to the basics. We don't want to act like revolutionaries and try and fix everything all at once with some sweeping blow. What we want to do is lay the foundations for substantive, long-lasting reform. Reformation looks very different from revolution.
That's good. What does that practically look like then? So, as a husband and father, as a member of my church, as a Christian, I want to be part of the Reformation. I want to be part of this change. I want to do my job. The church should do its job. What does that practically on a day-to-day with transgenderism and all the gender ideology stuff and critical race theory and all the other political stuff we're dealing with and abortion, and what does that look like in the midst of this culture?
Well, it looks quite peculiar because the church has to stand apart from the culture and must prophesy to the culture. So one of the first things that we have to recognize is that this is a day and a time that calls for great courage. Every Wikipedia page has been weaponized. We simply have to accept that. I'll tell writers and thought leaders all the time, don't try and fix your Wikipedia page. The activists are just going to turn around and put all of the homophobia, hate group stuff right back in. So just forget about it. Ignore it. Wikipedia should be irrelevant to us. And that takes courage. We have to have the courage to be spoken ill of. We have to have the courage to take our bold stands and to embrace cancel culture. Right now, getting canceled is a badge of honor. It's like getting a really bad review from the New York Times. You want that.
Right. You've done something right. Yeah.
Absolutely. But in terms of how we approach all of the issues that are swirling about us, and it seems as if there are more and more issues with every passing day as we try and protect our daughters, as we, desire to have our daughters have a chance at sports, or as we take a stand for life, as we take a stand for justice, as we fight against human trafficking.
Yep.
What we really have to do first and foremost is follow the gospel. The gospel declares very clearly this contrast between life and death. Every single fallen culture throughout all of time has been death dealing. Abortion didn't start with Roe v. Wade. Abortion started with the fall, going all the way back to antiquity. So what we have to do is we have to follow the gospel, where the gospel speaks of life and life dealing, where the gospel speaks of the image and likeness of God in man. All of those things that are an assault on the image and likeness of God in man are the places that we have to start. We have to start there. And as a clue to how to start there, we can go all the way back to Genesis 1 and 2, where we have, in very, very clear terms, the creation ordinances. There are about 25 creation ordinances in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. The ordinances are simply the declaration of what God intended the world to be before the fall. Yeah. What was a man? What was a woman? What was their calling? What is creation? What's it for? How does time work? All of those things are laid out very clearly in the first 2 chapters of Genesis. The battle lines in our day are always an assault against creation ordinances. This is not about human sexuality. This really and truly is an assault on the order that God has put into place in the world. Yeah. Our job is to restore the fallen bulwark of God's created order. That's the job of the church. And we start that with right worship. When you and I have talked before, and I mentioned the last 10 chapters of 2 Chronicles. Yep. It's a dismal section of the Bible to read because it's the last a few years before the kingdom of Judah is dragged off into captivity to Babylon and into 70 years of exile because of their unfaithfulness. But the story is really the story of a whole series of kings that seem to alternate between very, very good and very, very wicked.
Right.
And if we read it just sort of on a surface level, the pattern that we're going to notice is good king, really bad king, really good king, really bad king. And we'll see this sort of cultural roller coaster ride. But Ezra, or Ezra's scribe, whoever actually composed 2 Chronicles, did not intend for us to notice that pattern. There's another pattern. And the pattern is simply this. When Hezekiah or Jotham or Josiah began cultural reformation, they started by restoring the Lord's Day, by restoring right worship, by tearing down the idols, by confronting the corruption and the institutions of power. And then and only then did cultural transformation begin to occur. So part of what we have to do in our day is put first things first. Recognize that part of the reason that we've allowed this culture to go awry so quickly is that we've taken our eyes off of what is our first priority. Our chief end as human beings is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. Everything else flows out from that. If I'm going to be faithful as a husband, as a father, as a grandfather, if I'm going to be faithful as a citizen, if I'm going to be faithful as a pastor, it has to start at the start, not at the finish.
Yeah, that's so good. It's interesting, man. That is so good and so helpful, particularly when we consider how many Christians in particularly American culture, and I know it's different in other places, but in American culture, we are not interested in church. That's not important, or we're all given to the online church, or we say things like we can worship anywhere, and all these things that we've downplayed the importance of the church. We've downplayed the importance of right worship, and have become almost conservative activists more than we've become Christians that are committed to the gospel.
Right.
And understanding that we've got to get back to the beginning before anything else will change. And we ask ourselves, why are we losing this cultural battle? And just hearing you outline that, it just makes me step back and go, this is the reason. We're having this argument all the time. Why are we losing the cultural battle? Why is well, because we're not starting in the right place. We're trying to start midstream and fix what we cannot fix apart from the empowering work of God in our lives.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
powerful.
one of the things that the neo-Marxists, the cultural Marxists, the progressives, one of the things that they have done, learning from people like Antonio Gramsci and the Frankfurt School and Columbia University around World War II, and then eventually the California institutions at Berkeley and Cal. One of the things that they recognized is that they were not going to win the revolution by putting barricades in the streets and protests in the cities. And so they began this very, very astute strategy that they called, that Antonio Gramsci called, the strategy of the robes. His theory was, if we can capture the robes of authority, the robes of the judiciary, the robes of academia, the robes of science, the robes perhaps even of mainstream clergy, then over the course of just a couple of generations, they would win the culture.
Yep.
What's striking about that strategy is that they stole that strategy from us.
Right.
That's the biblical pattern of discipleship. That's the story of the Great Commission. They are able to win right now simply because they've been following our playbook.
Yeah.
So our job is to go back to our playbook. It's
good.
as simple as that. And it's also as simple as recognizing, because they are building on false assumptions, false presuppositions, and a terribly flawed worldview, their house of cards will collapse under the weight of its own absurdity. The question is, will we be ready when their house of cards collapses to step into the gap and to build institutions of lasting impact? That's what we've got to be focused on now. It's time for us to be founding the schools, the universities, the hospitals, just like our forefathers did, to lay the foundations for culture-wide renewal.
Do you think we're at a point where the Christian community at large is starting to understand that? I do feel like we've been at a bit of a tipping point. I've been encouraged with some people that I didn't think would ever be interested in the things of God, or raising money and building institutions and doing some of the work that you talked about. They have been. Do you feel like we're at a place where people are finally starting to understand that and we're moving in the right direction? Or how do you view that right now?
Well, I think there have always been some who have understood this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can remember 35 years ago, some of the great champions of the faith, J.I. Packer, R.C. Sproul, Francis Schaeffer, gathering together in San Diego, California, for a huge conference on the inerrancy of the Bible. I was privileged to be there for it. And the thing that was striking was that they understood where we were and what was coming, and they were calling it out. So it's we've been slow on the
Yeah,
uptake, to
yeah,
say the
yeah,
least. I do think I'm seeing good and encouraging signs, but we're late to the game.
yeah.
And so, though there are encouraging signs, this is not going to turn around quickly.
Mm. What if you could wave a wand right now over the churches in America? What would you like to see churches begin doing that they're not doing right now? I know that's, by the way, a very broad generalization. There are some incredible churches in America,
There are.
but
There are.
but broadly speaking, what are churches not doing that you wish they were that would get us closer to the place where we can start to move through this, as you coin it, reformation, through this process?
Well, first and foremost, prayer.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, we
yeah.
give lip service to prayer. We read books about prayer. We
Mm.
have prayer meetings, half of which is not prayer but talking.
Yeah,
We, but what we really need to do is be bombarding heaven, crying out to heaven, yearning for the grace and the mercy of God, the treasure house of heaven to be opened for us. So first and foremost, prayer, private prayer, public prayer,
yeah,
one-on-one prayer, group prayer. We need to be noted as a season of great praying. That's the first thing. Second thing is we really need to have fire from the pulpits. We need to have pulpits that are ablaze with righteousness, pulpits that are drenched in prayer,
yeah,
drenched in comprehensive theological substance, and we need to do it in such a way that we don't pull punches, and that we don't apologize for what the Bible says.
that's good.
Third, I think we need to be planting churches.
Yeah, that's good.
The truth is that more people are converted in church plants by far than in long established works.
Yeah.
So one of the ways that long established works can stir the passions and to rekindle the embers and bring it to flame is to be about the work of missions, church planting, reaching out across the globe and reaching out across the neighborhood. And then finally, we need to stop being so skittish about sharing the gospel with our neighbors.
Right.
We need to be effective evangelists. We need to recover some of the great old tools like Evangelism Explosion, and we need to be adept at sharing the gospel with people around us all the time. If now is not the time, when do you think the time is?
That's right. That's right. Dr. Grant, so much great there. I so appreciate your work, and your clarity on these issues is so helpful, and really calling Christians to be what God has called us to be. And if we get back there, things will change, things will move forward. You do a lot of work, you write a lot, you have a podcast, other areas of communication that you're involved in. Where can people follow you, read your works, get your books, and I guess anything else that you'd like to point people to? But folks need to be following what you're saying because you're so clear on these issues.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I have a website, georgegrant.net. I have kind of a history podcast called Resistance and Reformation on the Fight, Laugh, Feast Network.
That's great.
And I do commentary for World Radio and World Magazine. So my stuff is out there scattered all about.
Awesome. We'll post your website in our show notes for this show as well. But really appreciate the work that you're doing. Thank you for fighting through and doing this interview. For those who are listening, this is our second go of it. Technology killed us yesterday. It was the devil, I think. Probably not technology. It was the devil. But thank you for doing it. Very, very much. Very thankful for you and your work and for your time.
Thank you. God bless you.
Yes, sir.
We were not made to live in isolation. Sadly, many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day.
A lot of guys end up drinking, a lot of guys end up losing hope. Some of them will go to the VA and they'll try to get, prescription medications to help with PTSD. They'll get pills for anxiety, they'll get pills because they can't sleep, now they'll get pills for depression before they know it. They're taking 12 different medications. And when it's not working out, these guys lose hope, and that's why there's 23 guys a day committing suicide.
The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. As a result, we've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live.
Everything they said just kept hitting me in the heart over and over and over again. It's like all the things that I didn't know that I needed to hear. And I opened my heart to God that week, dude, and I've been a different person ever since.
Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. We provide our programs and resources, including travel, at no cost to our warriors.
I remember talking to a licensed social worker who actually handed me a pamphlet to Mighty Oaks. So I went. And I'm glad I did.
By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. Our mission is to serve and restore our nation's warriors and families who have endured hardship through their service to America, and to help them find new life purpose through hope in Christ. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org.
Very grateful for that conversation. Please take some time, go to the website. You can find that link in the show notes to the show. Listen to the podcast, get the books, read the resources. These will be very helpful to you, so please go and check those out. If you have not yet subscribed to this podcast, do it right now. You can subscribe on whatever platform you're listening from. You can also go over to YouTube, find our channel there. The Situation Report is our channel. Subscribe, hit that notification bell, leave us a comment, share the content out. And then I would encourage you, if you have the ability to do so safely, maybe you're driving and you're listening in your car, make sure you're safe when you do this. You can find links to all of that on our website, thesitrep.org, thesitrep.org. Sometimes it's easier to remember that than all of the other places. Go to thesitrep.org and check out the links there. Again, thank you so much for listening and or watching. We will talk to you next time.